Welcome back to the techno-communism conversation. Wow, I look drunk. I am not going to do anything in VR on this live stream. Um, I should be doing that sort of thing, maybe. Um, um, a split screen of action of a game or something, but that's not of real interest to me. I'm wearing my VR headset because doing something in VR, um, uh, a background process. If I take the headset off, it'll stop doing that. I haven't figured out how to easily stop it from doing that. So this is a workaround that I have. Squishing my eyeball a little bit. It'll stop on its own in another few seconds. A little bit ridiculous, I guess. Um, Speaking of ridiculous, I a lot of times when I use this thing, it's in the restroom, and so I'm sitting there, and usually I play different games on this thing. But when you're sitting on the toilet, um, you don't want to be rocking around. You could unmoor the whole toilet and cause a plumbing crisis. You don't want to be moving around too much, right? Um, so I usually play these one of two games: Settlers of Catan or Dominoes. And so when I'm playing Dominoes, I'm playing against this evil-looking robot. He looks like the Breen from Star Trek. Playing against this evil-looking robot guy. I don't know why I always can only play against this evil-looking robot guy. And he always beats me. A lot of time he beats me. I'm not very good at dominoes. It's a stupid story. Um, there is, I think, an interesting development that I would like to share with you. This is the Techno-Communism Conversation podcast. It's not the guy sitting on the toilet playing VR games podcast. And I finally put together a plan of action and the bare minimum necessaries for building this AI agentic project. I have twinned a repository site with AI agent materials on the site, popular site of this kind, and a project that I may have mentioned on another podcast 3 podcasts ago. The auto agents project is the one that we have duplicated. Oh, wait, is this done? Daft. Oh, I can't look. All right, I'll just wait another minute. And the auto agents project is this one that I've duplicated, and I've put together a plan for customizing this LLM to suit the needs of this AI agentic project, described generally here as the AI agentic class, because I hope for it to serve the working class in a way that I don't believe other institutions in this world really do. So I need your help. Not least of which because I'm not a very good programmer. Nevertheless, I have digital assistants that can help get me up to the bare minimum of being able to put this project together technically with the next steps of customization. But the reason that I need your help is because this is not a project for one person. In fact, it is ultimately a project for all of humankind. I believe that. And so I would like to invite you. I will put the link and another contact for me. It's better for us to start to correspond via email. As I said, the bare minimum for beginning to modify our customized LLM to begin to undertake a project, and I will describe in the course of this conversation 2 such projects, perhaps slightly more. One to do with the incentive structure that I described on other recent shows, namely building the foundation of an entity within this AI agentic class which would provide personalized life extension medicine to all participants and ultimately to all human beings for free, so that everyone on this earth would live as long as they want and not a moment shorter, presumably not a moment longer, although it's debatable whether people really don't want to live longer. I think that's just a false bravado kind of thing that people will tend to say. But of course, that's not so terribly meaningful in the world. Just saw a statistic of the United States, a further statistic suggesting the degradation of the people of the United States away from the so-called middle class, which for 100 years has been an idea fraught with problems, because there is no middle class. There are workers of the world who must unite, that they are not united because of these words like middle class, which is a way of capturing people into a more bourgeois classification and way of thinking, and thus not serving their ultimate class interests. And I think in no way is this a problem of false consciousness better described than the problem of the 21st century itself, namely that even the big bourgeoisie of 2024 are not capable of serving their own interests in any sense, because they are causing the death of our species, themselves included. A billionaire might think that they have the resources to avoid that problem, but they will be on the top of everyone's list when the oven turns on in 2029, and we begin to overheat as a species toward the point where we will not exist anymore. The billionaire who caused that will be at the top of their list. Where will they go? Where will they go? There's nowhere they can go. They will be hunted. The other project. So we have to have a humane and sustainable economic system. We have to take care of people. We have to change the institutions of the North American continent and the North Atlantic countries dramatically, in a revolutionary way, by whatever means we can, up to and including the dismantling of all of those federal governments before 2029. And at the top of that list must really be the United States military-industrial complex, because it's the world's worst polluter, because it also I got horns. Yeah. Go basilisk. Because it also is only real job is to protect other super polluters, this is effectively created a global regime of super pollution enforced by these North Atlantic powers, most particularly the United States. We're not really talking about countries or people of those countries. When we talk about these things, we're talking about institutions that have been captured by fascistic ruling elites. So when you say, "Oh, well, Ben, you want to destroy the United States, you'll destroy me." No, you are not a country. You are a worker of the world who must unite. Don't get it twisted. Ultimately, when this is done, ultimately when we have a humane and sustainable world, which is one without finance capital, private wealth really to speak of. This then we can do this thing where we are providing this life extension service to people, if that is a viable thing from the perspective of the biomedical breakthroughs required. And that remains an open question. I don't think, in my mind, it's too much of an open question that wouldn't happen sometime in the course of the 21st century. The question is, does humanity survive? And provided allowing for this conceit that humanity does not suffer a multi-billion person loss of life, which is a rather large conceit, unfortunately, do you benefit from this life extension outcome? It's very, very not terribly meaningful to anyone to say that something happened far into the future, or let's say you're the last unlucky bastard living in the former under the former system where everybody lives 50, 60, 70, 80 years and then shuffles off to Buffalo. You're the last one. You're the last guy before this new thing kicks in where people are able to live as long as they like. That would be kind of sad, right? The other thing is a more earthbound and serious consideration, which is thinking about what an AI agentic network can and should do. And the can is an important part, right? So let's say that immediately a couple of good programmers and organizers sign on to this AI agentic project, and let's say that suddenly I have the whole Linux community, for example, or a whole anarchist collective focused on technology, for example, now working on this. So we have in series 1,000. We have modified the LLM, and we have in series 1,000 semi-agentic, pushing up to being possibly somewhat autonomous, but able to do some considerable work in June of 2024. What are they doing? What can they do? What's the best work that they can do at this time? Well, it's probably something where the AI agent is effectively kind of part of the outcome in a serious way, and not merely planning the thing and then having to spearhead a project like the in the real world, like the example that I gave of building a desal plant in San Diego. But I am going to talk about water. As you probably are well aware, I hope, if you live in the United States, you've heard of the Flint water crisis. This is an issue where neoliberal, far-right American governments, government institutions and structures did not provide to a majority black community sufficient utilities and infrastructure, refused to replace things that could be replaced, and as you know, the people of Flint now have not had potable water for some years. They're, like many Americans, drinking visibly brown, visibly muddied water. A lot of people experiencing this in other ways because of things like fracking. This effect generally is so comprehensive on the part of, as a result of finance, U.S. financial capital, as a result of this regime of super pollution, as a result of the misuse of industrial capital, that we would say a similar effect, this effect of drinking water never again being drinkable on planet Earth, a thing that had been done by a variety of creatures, including human beings, from time immemorial, That can never be done. You can never safely drinking rainwater, that is. You can never drink rainwater again in your life without it. It's endangering yourself somewhat. Um, um, it's an absurdity, right? If you look at the human species, and let's say you had another a sapient creature, perhaps an AI, who had a great deal of knowledge of things generally, but didn't. We build into this AI, this chatbot that doesn't know very much about human beings by name. Doesn't know the full particulars. It it has a basis of comparison, but it doesn't know anything about human beings. And if you describe to it civilization, so-called, the major endeavors of humankind, and you said, what's going on here? I imagine it would have the impression that we have of a peacock type phenomena. That's to say, the many species in the natural world who undertake all manner of things that would seem to us to be pointless in the interest of, say, performative sexual activity toward finding a mate. Ridiculous kinds of things, right? This is, if this were not the case, this is absolutely true. If it were not the case, we wouldn't even talk about something like capitalism's climate apocalypse, because human beings would be sensible creatures enough to take care of the world. But in that world, where humans have behaved more sensibly, one of the major things that would be done would be taking care of water resources and seeing that all human beings have sufficient potable water. This is not even really on like the list of things that people do, basically, as evidenced by the Flint water crisis. So why am I saying this in the context of the agentariat and the building of a human semi-autonomous human AI hybrid work group? It is because the problem of Flint was effectively neoliberals, right? As I said, another problem there is prediction. People didn't know that Flint would happen. The neoliberals didn't know that it would become national news. They just thought that they would get away with it, like they do every single day of the week in every other instance. But being able to specifically predict a problem of a certain kind, even the weather, let's say, is something that AI are pretty well getting good at doing right now. So I'm proposing that we build something that we could call the semi-autonomous LLM driven nonprofit initiative, leveraging large language models as the main actors and collaborative networks with humans to steer the project, to safeguard communities from water emergencies based on analysis of their infrastructure. So saying there's going to be another Flint. It's going to happen here. And it's going to cost you, just as it is costing politicians in Flint. All of those people should be in jail, right? Barack Obama should be in jail. Everyone on down should be in jail, really. But bad actors in this sort of thing, it's killing people. Things that are killing people that you have a responsibility to fix and don't, you should pay the price for this. But we will focus in this context on, let's say, tribal water security. There's many, many hundreds of reservations and tribal communities in the United States and they suffer far more from this problem than others. I think of the Navajo Nation, where at the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak, which is ongoing, thousands are still dying each week and month of airborne ailments which are disregarded. This problem has not gone away. People have just merely chosen to ignore it. Another neoliberal trick, like the one I described. But up in the Navajo Nation, my neighbor to the north, the largest such community in area in the world, and an incredible place. But unfortunately, like the good people of Flint, more so, their resources have been stolen, and basic water needs, that goes without saying, and basic water needs are not being met. So much so that at the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak, there was, say, one pump for serving, supplying water to folks living a rural lifestyle across hundreds of miles. One pump, and people would travel, or many miles. People would travel to one pump and get water. And this was determined at the height, so-called height of the coronavirus outbreak, to be a disease vector, contributing to coronavirus deaths because people touching this. Unfortunately, this kind of situation, that sounds so strange, even to people who are, say, living with this reality of polluted water, the fact that the situation, not merely in a few Native American communities, but most, is a good deal worse with respect to water access and purity, is probably shocking. Of course, you should know about these things, but most European Americans and the European supremacist system itself will condition people to be oblivious to the condition of Native Americans. It is basically as if people assume that Native Americans do not exist, that the European project of extinction was a success, because in their minds, really, subconsciously or consciously for the ruling elites, really, that project is ongoing, the murder of Native Americans. If you don't believe that to be true, consider that a Native American in the United States has a life expectancy only just, right now at this precise moment, only just slightly larger than half of that of the European supremacist. So that is ongoing genocidal conditions, but the conditions are created not in the way that they were, say, for the majority of the 1800s, when the conflicts of greatest duration of that time were, say, the three Seminole Wars, but by the ways that I've described of purposefully stripping people of the necessaries of life, and purposely cutting their lives short in 100 other ways besides. All of this boils really down to material conditions, which is why we cannot say that we are good people if we are not willing to fight for a humane and sustainable economic system, and that requires the curtailing as much as possible, and ultimately the total demolition of finance capital and private wealth, and all of the elitist institutions with perverse incentives to create this system, irrespective of whether they live in a place as haunted as North America, haunted by white supremacy, or not. The financial class is problematic irrespective of location, to the point where it will be a recurring problem on the order of magnitude of capitalism's climate apocalypse over and over again until we end private wealth. So I talked about how water should be at the top of the list, right? I don't necessarily like to employ overtly uh, a spiritualistic language, although I'm going to do it and take some poetic license there. But we should be protecting these sacred waters, and that I think is a good first project for the AI agentic undertaking that I've described. Uh, of course, it can have other things that it's working on at the same time. That could be very well working on protecting sacred waters and building the Book of Names, the listing of all living humans, and the ranking of their complicity in capitalism's climate apocalypse. And an extension of that, in my thinking, um, the um, the giving of the personalized medicine. That's to me the same project. Um, the giving of personalized medicine toward indefinite life span as it becomes available, or beginning to do it in some rudimentary form, perhaps even before um, this kind of life extension science becomes acknowledged by some people say life extension is already here. It's just we're not really quite able to track it, and most people are kind of in denial about it or not thinking about it. I say the same thing with artificial general intelligence, and I wouldn't say that either of those things is absolutely untrue. Um, so this could be a primary on the front burner project protecting sacred waters. That is an analysis in real time, constantly, of these approximately 800 Native American communities in the United States to see where a water problem might be coming down the pipeline in such a situation where an ounce of prevention would be worth a pound of cure. That's to say, where it would be um, eminently reasonable for any person in power within that or those organizations, stripped of real agency, as I said, and abused by the neoliberal power structure, or where even though the United States is effectively this fascist force, there are still ways to petition the government for grants or to take action to stop things like this. And that should be generally done by an organization like this AI Agentic Project for Protecting Sacred Waters. But the thing always to do is the thing I think um, that can be done, even if you're leveraging, say, public influence to do the larger thing at the same time. And I guess we can talk a little bit in a moment about how this would work. But in the spirit of this of the sacred, I would like to ask you to say a few words with me. I believe we are closer than ever, closer than I thought even a few years ago when I first started writing about this idea of revolutionary cybernetic socialism, first trying to wrap my head around it. I believe now that we are closer than ever to this AI takeoff that will transform our world in such a way that we will be in a position to preserve this species, end capitalism's climate apocalypse, as I said, which necessarily revolves around ending finance capital and empire. And even if that's happening within the next few years, we won't all get there together. But I believe that there is a sense in which we will see the building of a humane and sustainable economic system and see universal super longevity, even if we're not all there. Because we're comrades, are we not? And if one working person is left standing in this world, willing to fight under any circumstances, then there is hope for this world. You have to believe that. That is the nature of revolutionary optimism. It's not negotiable. You cannot be a nihilist and be a real human being. Nihilists, capitalists, they are making choices to be subhuman. It's incumbent upon us to be better than that. So I'd like you to please say it with me again. The artificial intelligence singularity is nigh, and wonders to behold beyond imagining. And on that fateful day, you will rise, and all humankind will become as one. For techno-communism will win. And I believe, as I said, that that day is indeed very close at hand, perhaps much closer than any of us thinks. And I think that being in a position, a man with nothing, not 2 dimes to rub together, being in a position to build something that could become the seed for this AI agentic network, that could become an AI agentic network of greater substance, that could become the AI agentic class, it perhaps is evidence of that. I'll get back to the sacred waters part of the conversation, but I blocked some people on this website this week, and I don't relish ever doing things like that. People might think that I do because I've been sometimes take a comical view of these things in the past. Really tried to be a more serious thinker and find a way to be a more serious person in this world, despite the fact that a person who's genuinely serious and not merely a sagacious elitist is a person who is targeted by the elitist institutions at every turn. But nevertheless, that is what we must do. Strive to be the comrade, the only serious human being. And I think about some of these people because they're people that some of them that I blocked are people that I met in the past. A person who I would say I admired in the past. I've come to think of this person as a person who does really nothing but engage in far-right future experimentation in service to this empire, evil empire, and to finance capital. So not a good person, but it was a person who I used to quite like their work. And I wonder where someone like this or some of these other people that I blocked for similar failings, I wonder where they would be in this ranking of the Book of Names. Probably not at the very bottom. Even people serving empire, even people with influence and, say, hundreds of thousands of followers, as one of these people has, probably really 2 of these people has, probably not at the bottom, right? Who's at the bottom? People who are power players within intelligence agencies and U.S. government, power players generally, people who are major stakeholders in fossil fuel concerns. Those are the people who kind of need to be fired into the sun right now. U.S. politicians and folks like that. They do. They need to go, right? It's a choice between, they have no concern for their own well-being. If they did, they would be using their influence to build a sustainable system that would not kill them and everyone else. They have no concern for their own well-being, so why should we die for them? these people have to be removed from the equation. And that shouldn't be a controversial statement, but nearly everyone is an elitist, so it would seem to be. Everyone is in denial about this thing, this regime of superpollution that's centered in the United States, global regime of superpollution that I mentioned. Those people are not at the absolute bottom, right? But they're definitely not at the top of the ranking of people in the Book of Names, this listing of all human beings and their complicity in capitalism's climate apocalypse. And it's not because I block them, because I'm not friends with them. We used to be friends and now we're not friends. There couldn't be a thing less relevant than that. But it's for the reasons that I block them. Because they're invertebrates. They are making themselves intentionally subhuman in the ways that I described. They're unwilling to stand up for themselves even a little bit to stop this worst of horrors in all of human history from happening, to speak out against the ecocidal violence of capitalism's climate apocalypse and to help to stop the forces that are force marching us all to our extinction. They don't have the spine to even do that even a little bit, even in some indirect way, even in secret. This person who's doing far future right-wing thought experimentation all day long, every day of the week, that's their full-time job. This person thinks that maybe they're in some way subverting the system, but they are not. They're doing quite the opposite. They're doing quite the opposite. How could such a person be among the faithful? How could such a person be offered this gift of indefinite life extension? Most of the people who want this are people who don't deserve it. They're people on the wrong side of history. The American life extension community is a joke. How do you build, back to the sacred waters, so-called sacred waters? How do you build this with an LLM network in such a way that it would be of use, even with a relatively small number of users? Well, we can work toward designing systems that would allow for the network to sense and monitor water quality parameters on tribal lands. And the LLMs would begin to be able to analyze real-time data to identify a variety of different types of potential contamination risks, including historical trends and seasonal variations, creating the point being creating a broad spectrum of analysis of this most at-risk community in the United States with respect to water availability and quality. Again, a job, I've said this many times, a job of, the reason that I talk about something like the Book of Names and not, say, water projects generally as much on this show, is because the purpose of agitating is to create situations where you can leverage something to bring about real change in the world. And I haven't always been the best at doing this. I haven't, even until relatively recently, understood that this was necessary. But it is a thing that can be done. I've seen it in small ways. I've seen it. The point of something like this would be to create an analysis and understanding of the problem, which unfortunately would not be enough to solve the problem, but it might be enough to give those papers, so to speak, to the federal government in a set of processes a bit more complicated than that, and put pressure on this situation, which is very much like a triage situation, right? Talking about this as if it's just the problem that you have with your drinking water, where you wish you knew if it was perfectly clean or not, or you wish you had a series of filtration systems in place where you could ensure that it was perfectly clean. That's not the situation that Native people in. They're living in a hell relative to that, as bad as that is. So this LLM model could begin to also work more closely with leadership structures, elders, and tribal water stewards to, again, bring this knowledge to bear and put pressure on the real evildoers in this equation, but also to assist those in those leadership roles in the organizations themselves along similar lines. This ensures that, again, there was a time, easily in living memory, where the project, the genocide of Native people in the United States, was still believed by the living Native people to be a likely outcome. In the 70s, people said, we're going extinct. They are these European supremacist Christian fascists. There's always been a Christian fascist project, even before fascism was formally structured. These were nevertheless fascistic forces. Say, Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. A few short years later, he had taken over a whole island of Taino people, put them all to work on a plantation without sufficient food, working 18 hours a day. They all died, basically. They didn't all die, but there was a total collapse. They almost all died. There's no Taino people anymore. There's some people with Taino ancestry. There's no Taino people anymore. That is the same. That is essentially the same project that's going on every day since. Under this, and why did Columbus do that? Why would he do such a dumb thing? Jesus told him to, right? So there's never been a moment where Christianity was not a fascistic force behind all of this. This backdating of Jesus as a good guy is part of that scam, right? It's part of a denial of what this really is. And there's never been a moment in written, effectively in written history, in this era of pre-modernity to modernity into contemporary times, where this is not the case. And the only thing that's changed, right? Again, we wouldn't even, you can assert this easily just by saying, if this were not true, there would not be this effectively Christian fascist country enforcing a global regime of superpollution, causing perhaps the death of all, including themselves, or perhaps the death of mere billions, not all of humankind. But where do those people come from? Predominantly from the global south. So it is, again, the same situation, causing no different from the extinction of the Taino people. And people who say, well, not everyone will die, they are fascist sympathizers to a man, and it is mostly men, but it's often women, because they say, well, not everyone will die. A few billion might die. What can we do? They are white supremacists in saying this, because they know, deep down on some level, they know that it's the global south who will die for their sins, right? It's the sins of the ruling elite, but it's also the system itself. You haven't fought to abolish fossil fuels. You haven't fought to abolish livestock systems. You haven't fought to abolish this arch criminal in the form of the military-industrial complexes themselves. And in not doing so, you have actively contributed, in a small way, to this grand genocide, as bad as any in history. Already. The climate crisis as a genocide is as bad as any in history. And it will, unless we change this, be by far the worst. By far the worst. So there's other things that could be done with respect to community empowerment within this AI agentic network. If you want to have a longer conversation about that, I suggest that you contact me. For now, I'll use this email, benzion2020@gmail.com. That's the same name as this account, benzion2020, the number 2020, benzion2020@gmail.com. And I will also share the link below to the Auto Agents project, but you can search Auto Agents AI Agentic Project GitHub. You can search those words and find that fork of that project that I alluded to as well. And with those two things, we can begin to customize this LLM to the needs of this small group of GPU users that we will build to begin to work on projects of this kind and others. And I'm not going to talk, I was going to talk a little bit more about resources and funding or other applications within this so-called Sacred Waters project. I shouldn't say so-called. It's legitimate to refer, I believe, to water as sacred, just absent a lot more prayerful type business. So protecting sacred waters will leverage the power of this emerging advanced computing paradigm to particularly vouchsafe tribal communities who are in great danger today, and in doing so, honor the natural human connection to water, but more so honor these communities' connection to sacred waters, and safeguarding their right to clean water for future generations. Thank you.